This budget is not worthy of a yes vote. It's not worthy of a signature. Budgets are moral documents. And to say that this state budget is a betrayal of our Wisconsin values is a gross understatement. After a decade and a half of painful cuts to public education, coupled with enormous tax giveaways to the super rich and corporations, there was optimism this year that a better budget was possible. That optimism, unfortunately, faded not long after Governor Evers introduced his budget proposal in mid-February. Never in my 15 years in the legislature have I seen a governor fight so little for his own budget proposal as Governor Evers did this year. Republicans, for their part, stuck to their usual playbook, took the governor's budget, threw it in the trash, started to remake it in the image of tax cuts, cruelty, callous disregard for the needs of our shared constituents. The difference, thanks in part to fairer maps in the most recent elections, is at this time you guys didn't have the votes to pass it without Democratic votes. And so, in the last week, you brought in Senate Democrats to the table, offered us some table scraps to negotiate over to try and drag this budget over the finish line. And to the surprise of many, that was able to be accomplished, or is about to be accomplished. The end result, unfortunately, is a document that, despite being celebrated by some as a win, is grossly insufficient and will do far more harm than good. No place will the failure of this budget be felt more keenly than our public schools. Nearly every district in the state, including every single one of my school districts, has had to go to referendum in the past few years. Why? Because since 2009, inflationary deep increases to per-pupil funding were stopped. And today, these revenue limits lag behind inflation by $3,380 per pupil per year. $3,380. This budget does nothing to address that gap. It offers $0 increase to general school aids. This will lead to property tax increases across the state. In my district, in your district, Madam President, and in every district just about in this state. Two-thirds of school districts will see lower state aid this fall than the previous school year, with dozens seeing more than a 15% cut. The number one request I received from school districts was for special education reimbursement to be increased from 30% to 60%, which I talked about already today and talk about several times every day. This budget does not get us to 60% special education reimbursement. Some sufficient, it doesn't even get us some certain, it doesn't even get us halfway there after you account for the fact that it is some certain. Meanwhile, private schools in our state's various voucher systems get 90% guaranteed. Just this week, we learned that but that's not enough. Just this week, we learned that the Trump administration is withholding 11.5% in federal education funds, $72 million worth, with no idea if, when those funds will actually be released. With this and more federal funding for education very much at risk with the actions of the Trump administration, it's on us at the state level to make sure our kids' needs are being met. This budget fails to do that despite a $4 billion surplus, which we have stolen from our kids and hoarded and are giving over half of it away in tax cuts to people who don't need it and who are going to see their taxes go up in property taxes that won't address the difference. Healthcare is unaddressed. As the federal government prepares to cut nearly $1 trillion from healthcare over the next decade, this budget does nothing to increase coverage for people at risk. Instead, it offers hundreds of millions of dollars in cash to hospitals, which could help keep some of them from closing, but won't make healthcare any cheaper for you or me, and certainly won't undo the damage of the big, terrible bill that could pass in Washington as soon as tonight. This budget fails to extend Medicaid coverage for new moms to 12 months, something I think most of us, if not all of us, agree in this chamber, leaving Wisconsin as just one of 2 states to refuse to grant this bare right to mothers. This budget fails to expand Medicaid to 133% of the poverty level, which keeps Wisconsin among the 10 states which continue to send billions of dollars of our money to other states to cover them. So instead, we cover fewer people at greater cost to taxpayers. With what's happening in Washington, this may have been our last chance to expand Medicaid and join the other majority of states that have done this under the Affordable Care Act. And we're watching it pass by us like it's a 4th of July parade. If I had to summarize this budget, it's a failure to fight budget. Adequately funding public education, expanding health care access are not radical ideas. They are widely popular, desperately needed investments that will strengthen our state's future. And yet, it would appear that our Democratic governor is willing to sign a budget that fails to properly address either of these critical needs. New York City, the epicenter of global capitalism, is on the verge of electing their first Democratic Socialist mayor. They're still behind Milwaukee, where we have 3 in the past. If that doesn't tell you something about the state of politics at this moment, I don't know what will. The American people, more than anything, want elected leaders who will fight for them in this moment. Their beliefs don't always fall neatly on ideological lines, but they know cowardice when they see it. And this budget is cowardice. Next fall, when we go back to our districts to ask for our neighbors to vote for us, for half of this chamber, we're going to have to provide some evidence that we've been fighting for them, as hard as they are fighting just to survive. Voting for this budget at this moment in American history, when our federal government is hurtling toward autocracy, when the greatest upward transfer of wealth in our history is on the verge of becoming galvanized by law, this is the time to fight for our neighbors. And it's a dereliction of duty, and we all deserve so much better.
Senator from the